So for the next 2 hours, what we are planning to really discuss is on well-being. Sorry, that was just a joke. We know that we are already at 12:50, so we'll try to keep this sharp and focused as much as possible. So maybe I'll start with this question on well-being. It's not a new topic really. So maybe I want to start by asking the panelists about the last 2 to 3 years have been an extremely unplanned, for some of us even maybe traumatic with whatever we've experienced. What is one thing that you've really discovered about well-being, which you were not really addressing maybe a few years back, right? And maybe I would want to start with Manisha.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I think this was a topic we were also just picking up with the panel outside, and I know that this is something that it's become a topic of discussion everywhere in all organizations. So let me take you back in time, Feb 2020. We were just coming out of a great year business-wise, posted our fantastic results, cemented our market leadership even further. The only thing on people's minds now was, when are we going to go for that planned offsite to Thailand and just hang up our boots and do nothing but just have fun for 3 days, celebrate the wins, recognize the business heroes, and come back rejuvenated. Boom, global pandemic hits, national lockdown comes, the business has no visibility on when it's going to reopen or whether it's ever going to come back to normal. So what happens? The whole business strategy goes out of the window. All the plans for 2020 are down the drain. And the only thing on people's minds, the leaders' minds, and I'm sure this is true for all organizations, is how do we save the job security? How do we get the job security to our people? How do we make sure we don't have any job losses, pay cuts? Puma employed at that time 1,500 people. So the only thing that we were worrying was these 1,500 people who need to bring food to their families, pay school fees for their children, make sure that their EMIs are paid. They should not have any impact. So suddenly, I think the one big thing that happened, and it has been revisited again and again with wave 2 and wave 3, is how, along with the business strategy, it's extremely important for all organizations to have like an employee well-being strategy in place, which takes care of all the facets. And I know that we're going to talk about different facets today, and how your strategy has to speak to or from the organization values, and how the leaders and senior managers have to really buy into it and deliver it along with the HR teams. So I think that was one big takeaway especially for me, that it has to be a very inclusive strategy with the business leaders.
Aarti, do you want to add to that?
Yes, sure, Krishna. I think what Manisha brings to the table is absolutely true, so I will not repeat that, but I think this whole disruption, post-pandemic disruption, has fast-forwarded the future of work. It has accelerated the whole future of work and workspace and workforce. It has become a business imperative now for the board members, CXOs, business leaders, HR leaders, while it continues to be the priority of human capital. And I think the awareness has also increased about the linkage of employee well-being to the business performance. And if we really look at, the mindset change and the wake-up call that as business has seen, is really coming from the disruption COVID caused. And apart from that, there has been economic business headwinds which have come through due to multiple reasons. Great reset because of the unprecedented resignations that we are seeing, talent shortage that we are seeing. It has been a complete wake-up call at the organization level. At the same time, I do think that there has been a wake-up call even at the personal level. Employees and even human beings in general going through stress, anxiety, because whoever thought that pandemic will happen? Whoever thought that in today's times a war can break out? So there is anxiety, stress, physical ill health, sometimes worry about the future because the future of workforce is changing. And of course, very closely associated with some of us, we have gone through some personal losses, some personal griefs because of what pandemic brought to the overall humanity. So there has been a humanization, embedded in this change. Apart from that, very quickly, think about it, pre-pandemic, there used to be a clearer boundary, if not clearer boundary between the workspace and the personal space and home. And post-pandemic, and during the pandemic, here it was Zoom screens and MS Teams screens, which were giving you a peek into your personal lives with children bombing the video calls, or sometimes you're just saying, excuse me, I need to pick up the DTDC delivery, or your house help walking to you, asking for the OTP to take the delivery. And all these things become, it's become today's reality. It has brought in a lot of humanization, personalization, and now we can't say that we are not involved in the personal lives or, space outside work. So huge change has been brought in.
I mean, great points, right? I mean, you talked about bringing life to the center of every conversation somewhere. You talked about issues with respect to anxiety, stress. So maybe if, Sunita, if I can ask you, if you can add to this and also say, to what extent are we able to address some of these? Because there are policies about fitness, gym, so on, but there are also issues that we may not be able to address at an organizational level today. So what is it that we are able to address, and what continues to be a pain point? I'll come back to you.
Hi, thanks for that, Krishna. So I think, I think both the earlier speakers talked exactly the emotions that one went through. And, that personalization is so important because you now know the names of the spouses, the kids, because, that's what you see on the screens. And it's, there was a time when we said that we're only bothered about the employee, and anything that happens outside of the workspace was not a concern, at least for the company. But today that's completely changed, right? Because we've invaded the homes, so to speak. So very, very grateful for the families to have given us a space to work, because at least if I look at the story at Wipro, 240,000 employees overnight working from home is not an easy joke, especially when your homes are not ready, for continuously working from home. So one, I would say a lot of gratitude to the families for welcoming work into the homes and giving us that space. What have we learned? The biggest one is that lives are important. Like Aarti spoke about, there were so many people dying, including our colleagues, right? And that was not an easy emotion to deal with. And by the way, a lot of the things, and I know that, there's enough that organizations have done, be it with respect to the vaccinations or be it with respect to just the COVID care for the families. But I think what was important was to also step out of what you will do for the society, not just when it comes to your employees. So I think the big thing, at least if I remember what Wipro at that point in time did, was actually pack food for all the migrant workers, and that was a big one. That was a big deal to us employees, because we saw an organization that cares, not just for the employees, but taking care of, and the number, it was in millions, the number of food packets that were distributed on a daily basis for all those months. Or when it came to a hospital being set up in Pune, because there were no hospital beds. So we immediately turned out our development center because we said employees are not coming. That's free space over there. So we actually converted a development center in Pune into a hospital, a 450-bed hospital with ventilators and free for people outside. So I think these are things which brings out the human side of organizations, because it's not just about the welfare of you and your employees, but also the larger aspect of what are you doing for the society, what are you doing for the world in general, which people want to have a connection with.
Can we just have another round of applause for such inspirational leadership from there? Geeta and Gautam, if you can add to this, I think we've moved from a phase of really living in an emergency to be able to take care of well-being, touch wood, towards being a little bit more thoughtful and proactive about what can we do to improve the workplace health today. So Geeta, if I can ask you, what are the pain points today 3 years down the line in journey, if you really look at what are managers really grappling with to be able to address with respect to workplace health, wellness?
Sure, and I think as Satya says sometime that hybrid or remote is not a switch on, switch off. It's not binary that you are there or not there. It's actually a dial which you are continuously adjusting because it's keep changing, right? Even the situation what we are in today, after 2 weeks, it's very different, right? Everybody was so enthusiastic about coming to office, and now all the time you keep hearing somebody is sick, and then just a fever just keeps them away, right? Saying that, okay, stay at home. So people are asking question, what's the real policy? Do I need to come or do I not need to come into the office, right? So I think it's a dial which is continuously need to be adjusted as we learn. I think from a manager standpoint, and I think this is something very much related to how would you be the model for your employees and your organization when it comes to their well-being in the whole hybrid environment, right? So Dhanya did speak about early morning, the framework which we follow at Microsoft, which is model coach care, where you really demonstrate your behavior. And let me tell you one example which I practice, right? So I have declared my Tuesday and Thursday as a quiet evenings, which means after 6, no ping, okay? And if anybody is like really in an emergency or a business situation where they need to contact me, then there is an agreement that they will pick up the phone and call me. They won't expect that I am looking into the Teams notification all the time, right? And that's the model behavior I have really demonstrated to the team. To also talk about my own well-being and how am I taking care of myself, right? So I went through a very big personal loss last year. And I actually shared with my team members that I didn't hesitate to leverage EAP program. I actually contacted counselor, yeah. And then I shared with everybody saying that it was very useful because they did give me some tips that how should I be dealing with my personal situation. So that was very helpful. I think in turn what I realized, what I created was a psychological safety for my team, which means I saw my team was more vocal about talking about their well-being, their wellness. We started to openly discuss about the vacation, right? Who's taking off, who's not taking off, and how do we encourage each other to take off and pass on the responsibility, right? So I think in my mind, managers need to demonstrate and model and also coach and also share the care for show the care for the people. Because if they know that they can be vulnerable, they can talk about their issues with their manager, I think it just percolates in the whole organization, and we probably will end up creating an environment which is, I think somebody said in the morning, right, a more happy workplace is what I would say, right? Thanks.
Fantastic. Gautam, do you want to add to that?
So I come from a workplace which at the beginning of 2020 publicly announced that we will not let people go because we are not making money. So that was one less issue to tackle with, to say my job is secure, now I need to take care of my family and figure out internet connections, right? So what I've heard is the communication from leaders has to be very, very clear. If it is not clear, and it's HR's job to take care of wellness, it's not going to happen, right? So whatever leaders are saying has to come down to the last employee in the language they understand. And that takes care of some of the questions. The other thing that's very important in the last 2.5 years that we've seen is the individual approach. Some people want to come back to the office. Some people don't want to come back to the office. Some new people who right out of college don't want to stay with their parents and want to come back to the office. How do you take care of those individual needs? So one size fits all is not going to work. And it doesn't work in my situation as well. Because I want to go back to work, because I like interacting with people. The third bit that has worked for us so far is you leave it up to the people leaders to figure out what's going to be the construct of their teams coming back, and for them to understand what keeps them motivated to work at Mastercard and not at a Visa or not at any other floor in this building? Why does the Gautam of the world enters the building, enters the lift and presses the button 5 and not a 7? So unless your frontline people leaders understand their own people and what triggers them to come back to work, we can keep talking about wellness and coming up with programs and webinars. It'll not go down well. I think last point that I have is equip people to talk about what they're going through. And I was sharing this with the panel earlier, is Gautam from 10 years ago, and if my team member would come to me and say, hey, I'm going through a marital problem and I need the time off, would have a very different reaction to what I would have today. So it's going to be very simple for HR folks to make sure that it's okay to talk about work and family at work. You just need to give them the right perspective and have mature leaders. If you don't have mature leaders, you have more ER cases coming your way. As simple as that.
Very interesting points. Incidentally, I was going through a research report by Microsoft, which does this research on work trends and productivity. And they say that from March 2020, which is really the onslaught of COVID, if I have to call it, the average number of after office hours that an employee spends has gone up by about 30%. The average number of meetings that an employee attends has gone up by 158%. Right? And it's very interesting to see how a lot of panelists are talking about putting the onus not so much on the policy, but also in the hands of managers and leaders. I wanted to reach out to Jeeva for this next question. Right? You come from a very different industry where you need people in the store, in the field, right? So what are your takeaways, or what are your reflections on the role of a manager fundamentally, or the role of a team culture in driving well-being? And where does well-being really start? Does it start on a great counseling policy, or does it start in the leadership that a manager brings to the store, shop floor, so on?
Yeah, so thank you, Krishna. I think that's what I was about to say, because maybe I don't know how many of this audience could connect or relate to my kind of business. Almost 90% of my total workforce works in the field, the stores. That means about my total workforce is 2,500 people. So mostly around 200,000 people are working in the floor, in the shop floor. So the challenge is, especially challenge was during pandemic, 85% of our stores were shut. And people had to migrate from one town to another town. So at the same time, we want to make sure that their job is secured. That is the first communication. We need to really give them that confidence. And as HR fraternity, it is our responsibility to connect with them every day and tell them that no, you are safe. There is a process we follow. And every day morning, each HR professional is to connect with X number of people, and they have to talk to them personally and then try to understand whether they are safe. And there is an app quickly we developed, and then there is every day morning I have to fill up a symptom checker for me and my family. So if whoever is not doing it, then we make sure that we reach out to them. Not only HR, even the managers as well. As you rightly talked about, the managers as well. So this is the kind of support we used to give it to them. And of course, in terms of the employees who is migrated, we made sure that they also have a job opportunity in their hometown. So wherever the advantage for us is, we are spread across the country. Our presence is there even in smaller towns. So we used to, the functional agnostic or formal agnostic or business agnostic, that's what we experienced. A person who was selling in electronics the previous day, he was selling rice and dal next day, because only the grocery business was operational during lockdown. And the employees had to really struggle to reach out the store. They have to meet policemen, they have to go through a tough time to reach the store. And by the time they reach the store, they serve the customer, because it's all about serving the society as well, right? And as an organization, we need to take care of their essentials. So one of the initiatives what we have implemented, whoever is coming to the store during the lockdown time, we make sure that their groceries, rice, dal, vegetables, all are taken care. So everyone can really, they can take it home. So this is the kind of comfort, there is a safety net. There is a safety net. The second, of course, the physical health. They've done a lot of stories, and I think you would have also heard stories from media, so we airlifted some of the employees. A lot of things have happened, and I don't want to talk about those things. But the most important point, I think Gautam also talked about, and Geeta also talked about, it's psychological safety. And what is the kind of conversations we have? What are the words we speak, right? It is not only having a conversation, even for the employees, corporate employees, it's not the conversation that you have it in a closed room. So you have it with your extended family. So I need to, whenever I'm having a conversation, my meeting, I need to be cautious of my tone of language, tone and language. Everything matters, right? Because it's also impacting the family. So, and we sensitize people. There are a lot of initiatives we have taken to sensitize people. Of course, the managers played a major role because it's not HR can do everything, right? So it's all about the managers bring a change. And these are some of the initiatives which I've done.
Interesting point on psychological wellness in the construct of what you had mentioned, right? And these are constructs that are difficult to measure and empathize with. In the sense that if I say that I'm diabetic at the age of 35, people understand it more easily. But if I say I'm anxious or I'm stressed, it's far more difficult to measure or see how a person is stressed. Right? So I want to touch upon this topic a little more in terms of mental well-being, to say how can we really step up the game in this. I just want to take an example. I was in a similar workshop some time back, and I was asking people, it's very easy for people to talk about going to a cardiologist, going to a gastroenterologist and so on if you're not physically well. But do you know the difference really between a clinical psychologist, a psychiatrist, a life counselor, a life coach? For what problems do you have to go to which person, right? And there's a lot of awareness gap in terms of mental well-being. So maybe I'll ask Geeta if you can add to this, and Sunita. How do you really step up this game on mental well-being, both from an awareness standpoint and an adoption standpoint?
So I think I will say talk more. Okay, the more you talk, I think it will create an environment where people will be really free to really talk about and feel safe that they won't be judged if they are talking about this, right? So I think it's very important that we let people feel that they're not judged when they are talking about this. That's the one thing. And I still remember, like, initial COVID days, people were not even comfortable saying that they have COVID. Okay, people thought that it was like crazy to tell somebody that. I met somebody in a party in the initial days, and I asked her that you're not sounding or not looking well. She said, yeah, I think I have a COVID. I said, seriously? Then why are you here? She said, no, nobody should know. It's a family marriage and we are in COVID. I said, no, please go out. It's like you're risking so many people. But now we see that people are not afraid, right? Because people know it's curable. People know that there are even different challenges, how people were dealing with the whole COVID, right? So I would say that talking more and creating awareness, and there are two steps, I think. See, awareness alone won't help. So all the programs corporates might launch, we hear so many articles, so many news articles, that's awareness. I think at least people, I would say, now are aware. And we are stepped up that game of making people aware. The second part is a courage. That do you have a courage to come out and speak about that what are you dealing with and how are you dealing with. So I think in this step up, I would say that all of us should role model in our individual life, whether it's personal life or professional life, to talk about saying that I am not okay, okay? And our MD wrote an article some time back, Anant Maheshwari, he said, it's okay not to be okay. All right, so that's the article he put it, right? So the more people talk about it, the more courage people will gather to come out of it. I'll just add a tech element because I can't just walk away of not talking tech element. See, when people have a courage to talk and come about the well-being, it is something which they are proactively doing, right? But we have ton of data now which is available as an organizational analytics, right? Which is possible from whichever collaboration tool you take, which is indicating you that this person might be on a path of burnout right now, given the number of hours this individual is really working for, weekends they are really working for, right? So we should use some part of the analytics as well, or the technology intervention, to really help. I can go on and on technology, but there are some very cool interventions which technology can do to help people, to help organization, I would say more importantly, take proactive measures, not be reactive. in all of that, right? So.
Yeah, I'll just add to this, Krishna, and at least from a Wipro story, I remember more than 2 decades back, we had something which was very focused on mental health. So if I go back to the program which we had called Mitra, and at that time the point was that as managers, one, can I equip you in terms of getting to know early signals? 2, even if you're picking those early signals, how can I train you within rather than, waiting to go to a counselor outside? Because all said and done, at least 2 decades back, there was clearly this inhibition that, if I'm talking to a counselor, there's something crazy about me, So I better not say that I need help, especially on the mental part of it. So what we did was conceive this program called Mitra, where it was people who felt that they could volunteer their time to do more in terms of just speaking to colleagues when they needed support and help. I think that created a safety net long ago where people were absolutely fine to say that I'm not okay, right? There is something which is stressing me, and I tell you, stress can take so many forms, right? And half the time it's your own awareness where you just think that I'm fine, I can do it. And what we try to train our managers, not just managers, even peers, I could be observing my colleague and actually point out that, hey, there's something which is not sounding right, or something which is not looking right, you need to take help. So I think what's important is how comfortable are you having these conversations in an office setup? And once you're comfortable with that, I think the rest will follow, because as an individual, I feel safe to say that I need help, I need support, and I don't need to really hide or try to be, bravado is not required at that point in time. I can comfortably speak about it. So I think programs like what we conceived 20 years ago has actually come in big time during COVID, where this had to be really stepped up because the number of people needing that obviously went up.
I think I also have something to add here. For me, there was something that happened which really shook me and just confirmed and reaffirmed my focus on this area. So one of our colleagues, she lost her parents, both of them, last year to COVID in a span of 1 month. Of course, she and her sister were left alone to grapple with the grief. The organization was, of course, with them. I'm sure their relatives and friends as well. But she comes to me after 3 months and she tells me that, Manisha, I could only live these 3 years because there was a helpline, which of course we provide to all employees, where she could, go and talk to somebody whenever she was feeling low and she was in the black hole. And every time she could speak to that person, she was able to bring herself back. And after 3 months, she felt comfortable enough to actually share that with me. I think for me, it was one of the biggest eye-openers that, and like all of you pointed out, that we all have these platforms for years now, but COVID and post-COVID really reiterated that, these are important platforms to make people aware, talk more, tell people what it can really do to you. So rightly pointed out, I think it's an extremely important thing to have, to focus on. And I think organizations these days are really stepping up their games, and great to know about Mitra. I think it's a great initiative, and I'm sure all of us will do a lot more on this.
So fantastic points on, I think, how to step up the game on mental well-being. I want to slightly shift the topic. You have a question? Can I just take the question towards the answer? Thank you so much. I just want to shift the gears towards financial well-being as a topic for quick discussion, right? And I don't know if some of you would have read this article by MIT Sloan Research, which talks about the 100-year life, which primarily says that life expectancy globally has been increasing, and if it continues to increase at the rate at which it's been going up for the last few decades, very soon we will have a lot of people living for 100 years. What this really means is that a lot of us would have worked for 30, 40 years in our professional lives, and probably we would be living for another 30 years post our retirement, right? So maybe I'll move to Gautam to ask this question, to say, how do you, because on one hand you have employees who want to kind of chase their dreams and make a buck for the next 1 week, 1 year, 1 decade. And then on the other hand, you also have people who have to live for another 70 years from the time they start working, right? So how do you stop pandering to the needs of financial well-being on the current day on compensation and elements like that, and tell people and make them aware about saving more and stuff like that?
So I think employees today are very well aware of their financial situation. The people who are joining in are far well equipped with financial knowledge that what my generation was. So savings is not going to be an issue. You will see a very different type of a boomerang 30 years from now. You will see a very different gig economy happen. And we have sparks of that happening in markets which Mastercard serves, where the pandemic had actually shut down the so-called Kirana stores in Colombia, you know. And there are people who've lost the next generation, but they still need to survive. They're at 80 plus age group. They hardly use mobile phones. How do you set them up for success? And that's a problem statement that the government there has, because they don't have enough resources, to pay them every month. While Elon Musk talks about it, that we all should be paying, you know, X amount to individuals because our jobs will be automated. Reality is we don't have enough money. So we'll have to look at it from a lens of people doing different things throughout their walk of life. I started off as a technologist into risk assessments, into HR, and I don't know what I'll do next, right? So there'll be a boomerang. People who'll retire will come back to work. They will do reverse mentoring. They'll get equipped on new technologies from younger people. They'll share from their wisdom of what works, what does not work, because they've seen the world go around. And the pandemic is behind us, but the geopolitical situation still remains. There are 2 active wars happening in the world today, which has an implication back in India. If more such things happen in the world across, we'll have a very different way of working 5 years from now, or I think 30 years from now. So we'll see upskilling, we'll see reskilling. We'll also see technology playing a very crucial role, because at the end of the day, that's an enabler that we all have. I think I'll refer back to one discussion that happened at the beginning keynote is, you know, the bots are your team members, and you should you know, adapt to that. In my friends group, we call them our digital servants, just to feel superior, that we're still a, you know, superior race. And they're very good at what they do, right? They would send you nudges. I use Microsoft Viva to keep telling me, you promised to get back to these 30 people 30 days ago. You've still not done it. So all those things are great, but will the same skill be applicable 5 years from now? Not really. Will we have to work? Yes. Will we be on Mars? Anybody's guess.
Interesting. I just want to do a quick show of hands, if I may, to say, how many of you sitting in this hall exactly know the amount of savings that you should have if you were to retire today?
We have a software.
And maybe for those of whom you're not seeing it, I maybe in a hall of about maybe 200-300 people, I see about 3 hands rising, right? So that also means that financial well-being needs a significant amount of awareness still, and that's interesting. I want to now focus on how do we bring this into a management agenda more strongly towards driving a lot of these topics that you've spoken about, right? I think a lot of you many years back would have pushed this concept of employee engagement, right? Many years back into becoming a very reportable metric, which gets discussed by leaders, which gets its place along with all the financial metrics, right? Is it time really for a well-being index to be a part of management discussions? Right, Aarti, would you want to take that question?
Krishna, before I start, and I'll answer this question very quickly, what you asked. We are a metric-obsessed generation or corporate culture. Everything has to be metricized, or everything has to be given in numbers. And I just want to take an example and leave you with some food for thought. Sunita just spoke about what they did in converting the place into the COVID facility to help people. You all clapped. can you imagine the sense of pride in the employees? You know, what the organization is doing for them. Can you measure that exactly? You know that there is a sense of pride existing. Similarly, in Capgemini, when people were falling sick and they were suffering from COVID, we were providing tiffins to them so that, you know, they don't have to cook and somebody doesn't have to cook for them because they're suffering and they have to be quarantined. And when clients were talking to them with such a sense of pride, they were saying, my organization was providing it for me. Can I measure that? So sometimes, as my friend Gayatri says, that, you know, it is an impact economy. Can we draw insights out of what we are doing rather than depending on the numbers? Now, I'll give you an example. Employee Engagement Index. It does give out some numbers to us and it does throw out some numbers. What do? We create action plans. Do we again measure what action plans have done? Do we again measure what is the ROI on each of the measures that we have put? And then, despite high employee engagement index, you still see mass resignation. How do you correlate these things? I think depending on insights is the way to go, because there is no one single function that will drive your well-being or your assessment of well-being. Our managers providing flexibility. Okay, you provided the framework, you provided the policies, there are practices, leadership is working well. Are managers on the ground executing it? Are your people getting the benefit of it? In Capgemini, again, you know, we have a well-being hub, and there's something called mood diary in that, you know, so people, when they come to work, they can log in, how are you feeling, and it's just a simple thing, because I think employees are also fed up of surveys and answering questions every 30 days, every 60 days, and this survey and that survey. So I think we need to make it easier. Just gauge, see sentiment analysis. There are multiple tools existing in the market, but I'm not sure if I'm ready to incorporate them and get a number out of it. What I want to see is the multitude of things that we are doing as leadership and multitude of things that we are percolating down to our middle management. Are they really working? How are people feeling? And as we are saying, communication, actually there's nothing called over-communication at this point in time. As much as you talk to our employees, you will keep gathering insights and what is the impact of the things that we are doing. Employee Engagement Index is a combination of everything. Probably you can push few questions about how people are feeling, how are the sentiments, how are they managing their emotions. And you cannot depend on Employee Engagement Index also, which is done once in a year, and by the time you reach the next Employee Engagement Index, it's all gone. So it's continuous listening, continuously understanding the sentiments of people.
I think we're almost up with the session. So I just want to have, just like the way we've done it with the audience, maybe a quick show of hands with the panelists. In terms of, it's great to talk about all these topics really, but if you have to go back to our offices and book your CEO's calendar on a Monday morning, how comfortable are you to get this done on a topic like well-being today?
Very comfortable.
100%.
Very, 100%.
I think that's the change that we're really seeing. In research, it's increasingly shown that the one non-financial thing that most leaders would want to discuss in boardrooms today is the topic of well-being, right? So I think, thank you so much for sharing your views and thoughts.
More than the outcome, I think the actions are more important. I think
Absolutely.
we need to really look at the actions, what you're doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I don't know if we have time, but we can take one question, yeah.
We talked about the stress and well-being. One thing I came across with senior people are my students, time. We don't have any cap on the working hours. They say I have to log in at 10 o'clock, but I can't commit to my class when I will be able to join in because they're working 12 hours, 14 hours. Now here where the rubber hits the road, now you talk about well-being.
Anybody who wants to take that?
Yeah, I think that's a... Yeah, I'll just take that up. I think, yes, I think time management in my mind is perfectly can be equally correlated with the stress part of it. And that's where I was saying that probably we have to start using some insights from the data, what it throws us that how people are really working. I'll just give you one small example and that might help. when we were using all this analytics during pandemic time, we realized that there were many people who will log in on Saturday and Sunday evening, most of the time, okay? And we were trying to understand why people log in on Sunday evenings, right, really? And we realized that most of the time, Monday was a meeting in Microsoft. Monday morning, people used to meet large format internal meeting, which is about 5 people reviewing something, 6 people reviewing something. And then we issued a mandate saying Monday morning, first half, no large format meeting, only learning time, focus time, or one-on-one, if you want to have, which means no prep needed. And we saw a dramatic drop on the weekend working because people were not preparing for the meeting then. At least on the Monday morning, they were not preparing. So yes, you are right. I think time is a thing. So 2 things need to be done. One, keep looking at the data and make change, and also model the behavior. That are leaders really modeling the behavior of doing time management? I think that's a few things which we can try out. Thank you.
I hope that answers your question.
I think I can add just one more perspective to what Sir said. I'm a victim of this success. 14 hours is a regular day for me. It can go up to 18 as well, and on days there is no work-life balance. But that's not the whole 365 days. And then there are priorities in life. If the priority is for me to attend a session like this, then those 14 hours can be adjusted somewhere else. So like everybody's saying that leaders have to role model and they have to set the pretext, it also comes down to the individual is what their priority is. There are days I don't want to talk to people, I just want to focus and I'll block out my whole calendar saying I'm very busy today. All I'm doing is probably working a Saturday evening, setting up my emails for a Monday morning blast going out to people. But that's a priority that I have set for myself. Nobody's forced it on me. The organization says you should not be logging in. But then there are things that you are after as individuals, and we are so greedy that you can't stop yourself. Learning, very important. We all sign up for courses. Again, I'm a failure at that. Signed up for so many courses, never finished. So obviously I'm also learning and evolving as a human being. But having said that, I think wellness is a shared responsibility. We can have resources, we can set up the right environment and stuff like that. If people don't want to use it, they don't want to use it. It's going to be that.
Great. So I think we'll stop it here because it will be really bad for us to talk about well-being, stopping you from having lunch. Thank you so much.